Hi.
Hi, how's it going? I'm Alex, and
I'm Alina.
I'm from.
We are in Nevada City.
We're in Nevada City. We're in Nevada City, California,
Mm-hmm.
visiting from Los Angeles, and yeah, I'm from kind of everywhere in America.
And I'm kind of from everywhere
Yeah.
as well. Where were you born?
I was born in California. Where were you born?
I was born in North Carolina.
How long did you live there?
6 months. How long did you live in California?
Yeah, like 5 or 6 months.
Yeah, we have that in common.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up in mostly Africa and Canada and a little bit in Oregon in this tiny town called Cave Junction. Yeah, that was my childhood, kind of a unique one.
So you traveled around a little bit?
Yes.
How did you end up traveling? Were your parents working in different areas?
Yeah, my dad worked for World Wildlife Federation and other nonprofits. He was in the Peace Corps for a long time after college and ended up, doing tourism and sustainable farming and all kinds of stuff like that. So it took us all over the place.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
And Alex?
I would say for the most part, I grew up in Colorado and parts of the Southwest. I lived in Arizona, spent a lot of time in New Mexico, had a stint in Virginia, and a couple weeks in Wyoming. Like, I've just kind of been everywhere.
On the run, are you?
Yeah. My dad as well moved a lot. We followed, and but yeah, I would say Colorado for the most part has been the most
What you call home.
what I would call home, what feels the most like home.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so what do we hear? What would you like to talk about?
Well, we thought we would talk a little bit about being an artist in whatever capacity you might be an artist, and the creative process nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Trying to stay authentic.
Yeah. Trying to stay authentic, but also trying to keep maybe the little glimmers of romance that you might have about what that is and how fast it's changing. And yeah, it's a pretty interesting topic. Something that Alina and I talk about a lot as.
What do you think
artists.
the biggest challenge is these days?
Well, first of all, you've chosen to be an artist.
Yeah, that's
So
hard.
That's one of the biggest challenges.
Not that I think you don't have a choice, though. I think that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that everyone is an artist, but I think that if you go into the world deciding that that's where you want to make a living, I mean, if you could do it any other way, you probably would, because it's a lot easier to do something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
But not as fun.
Some people, it's like they don't have an option.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't have an option. But I would say, honestly, like, if you love it and you're already like one of those people, it's like you're going to be doing this whether there's money in it or not. The biggest challenge is that there's all these kind of extra things that you feel like you got to do to, make a career out of it or make it sustainable. Something that, because if not, you're going to end up getting, a day job and doing your artwork, the midnight hours, or on the weekends, which if you love what you do, you might not want to be doing that. You might want to actually just be doing it full time. And in that case, you got to divvy up your time, be playing, the creative game that's, started to kind of, I don't know.
The creative game. No,
The creative game,
you're right.
yeah.
Absolutely, the creative game.
I'm not trying to sound too pessimistic.
No, you don't sound pessimistic. You don't. I like that.
Well, it sounds like it's still undefined because things are evolving so quickly that you're probably, Alex and I, you and I talked about the implications of the digital world and AI. Can both of you talk a little bit about what you do and how the technology affects what you do creatively?
Yeah. I've worked primarily as a model for just about a decade, but I also act and I also have made my own films and write. So kind of all things that are affected by AI. But it's interesting. I don't know if there's a level of, I don't know, I try to be optimistic because it's kind of one of those things where your connection to your art is something that nothing and no one can take away from you. So ultimately, fundamentally, I feel faith in that people connect on a soul level with art. I mean, if you look at I'm spacing on her name. What's the artist in New Mexico?
Georgia O'Keeffe.
Georgia O'Keeffe, yeah.
Yeah. So seeing a photo of hers on the internet, I always kind of thought like, oh, I could do that. That's nothing. And then seeing her art in person in her museum, you can feel her energy through it. You can feel her soul.
Yeah.
And I think that there's an innate part of us that connects to that, but it is hard to do that through a screen.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we all crave it.
And what kind of films have you made?
I have made all short films. I would love to do a feature one day, but I can't even imagine because short films themselves are so much
Overwhelming.
So overwhelming, yeah. So my first short was a 5-day shoot, which was a lot, and I crowdfunded for it, and it was like a drama. What's the thing? Like a it was based on myself, but it was like a coming of age.
Okay.
Yeah, and then my second project was kind of surreal. I wanted to play a little bit more with tone, and then my last project was comedic, kind of like campy.
And were you in these films?
Yes, I also acted in all of
Nice.
them.
Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Writer, director, and performer.
I directed 2 of them,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to do that again.
Okay.
I'm going to do one or the other.
You
Yeah.
wore all the hats.
It's too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
you're even in charge of Crafty.
No, I had a PA in charge of Crafty,
okay.
thankfully.
That's good.
And by
yeah.
the way, do you have websites? Like
Oh.
if I put it in the description
Yeah.
for the video?
Yeah, Instagrams.
I have
Okay.
Instagram and I have my website.
Okay. I can put them in there then.
For
later.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are the names of your movie or your films?
First one's called Lullaby. Second one is called Free Stuff, and the third one, which I wrote, but it was a friend's concept, and she directed. It's called 3 Feet Under.
Oh, okay. Nice. And Alex, do you have a studio?
Yeah,
You paint,
so
right?
I'm
You-
a painter. Yeah,
Yeah.
I make paintings, drawings, write poetry, although that's a little bit more of a private pursuit.
Yeah, does tattoos.
I have done some tattoos. I've given people cool scars. Yeah. And but no, I've been making 2-dimensional art for as long as I can remember. And yeah, I have an art studio. I've had an art studio. I live in LA. Have one there, although I've moved a lot and I am in the process of trying to find a new studio, which is surprisingly difficult since the pandemic, because everybody started working from like remote, so studios, and people have started, Etsy's and stuff like that. But
At what?
I think good Etsy's, like they'll make
yeah.
crafts and sell things, and I think they need
Right.
studios, and good on them. LA is just a difficult city.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this has kind of come back full circle to, again, the technology and the difficulty of
AI.
AI. So
I think AI is, I don't give a shit. Like, it's just it's a tool, and it's a really exciting tool, actually. I think it's really an exciting tool that artists should use. And if your craft is threatened by AI, you should probably be considering updating your craft, because it's the way that it goes. Like if your specific genre is so threatened by AI, it's like that shit was meant to go extinct anyway. Because I'm sorry, and I'm going to be bold here.
I mean, but I think that
AI is not that
anything-
smart.
Yeah.
It's not that freaking amazing.
That's what we were talking about the other day.
Nothing touches the
Yeah.
human
Yeah.
like you might, and I'm sure there's tech people who are going to be like, that's
Eventually
totally
we'll
not
get
true.
there, yeah.
But whatever. Like, I think that people get really scared and threatened by technology without recognizing that technology is ultimately just a tool created by people, and it's a really exciting tool that we can all use as artists to expand our abilities as artists, as humans. creating this art.
Do you think AI is overplayed right now? Pumped up?
I think it's an
yeah.
exciting like new. It's
Yeah,
pumped up
that's a
because
good way
people
to
are
put it.
excited about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
it's-
people are
it's
excited
a new
about it.
toy.
I think it's fascinating.
Yeah.
And so weird.
Yeah, we actually had a really fun idea. Do you want to share the idea that you had about?
No, because
oh.
I don't want people to do it.
But
Come on,
maybe
just
if
a
you
hint.
follow us, you'll see.
Yeah.
Well, she's a
Something.
filmmaker and I'm fucking insane, so
Yeah.
well, I was like, what if I just plug these crazy ideas into AI and then they'll generate what they do, these like weird photos of people with six fingers
and
and
we'll
like
use
drifting
them
eyes.
and make it into a
And then
tangible.
what we'll
thing
do is
somehow.
then create like back shop it. Like I don't know if that's the right word, but
I like it.
back shop it. So instead of relying on the images that it generates, we'll use the images as references to create something in the tangible realm. So then maybe what we do is use practical effects to mimic what AI has generated.
Okay.
Since
And
it
then
can't
create
really get hands
films.
right and
Yeah,
stuff.
it can't do certain things right. So then we'll use film to
The kind of uncanny valley.
exactly make
Yeah.
like strange scenes that can be documented in like
Various forms.
yeah, like a short screenplay or maybe just a photo series. But then I could also paint
Paint
them.
it. Yeah.
And do you like Paul McCarthy? Not the Beatles, the filmmaker.
clarify.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Give me a reference.
He's an artist, filmmaker, but he has these big studio spaces, and I'm not like I don't know a lot about his work, but he makes films, and they're very
a lot of
weird.
stuff.
Are you talking about using AI to take surreal or abstract concepts and then try to bring it to
Yeah.
the human,
Yeah,
the ability for the human to
yeah.
to absorb-
Maybe the AI is not the end result. AI is the tool to generate the reference
Yeah.
to create an end
It's like
result.
Okay,
it's almost like
okay.
taking it back.
It's okay. So
reverse
like,
engineering.
A lot
Yeah,
of a lot of
it's okay.
painters
Yeah,
nowadays.
I
A
like
lot of the
that.
painters. Yeah, reverse engineering. That's
Yeah.
exactly the word I was like. Not backdooring. Like.
Yeah.
But a lot of painters use Photoshop these days.
Yeah.
Because it's a tool. And it's a really helpful tool. Just like painters use projectors. Just like freaking Vermeer uses the camera obscura, whatever.
Yeah.
There's tools that are at our fingertips that you'd be a fool not to be using because in the end it's about what you're making and
Yeah.
it's all has to go through the human machine anyway.
Right.
So why not like the way painters use Photoshop to create a composition to then paint? Why not use AI as a Photoshop tool?
Yeah.
And just be like, I want AI to generate this crazy thing
Yeah.
the same way you might have AI draft you a story, and then you're going to make edits to
Yeah.
that story anyway.
Yeah.
But you don't feel like it takes away from the creative process,
It's
or the originality, or
I think it's a statement.
Mhm.
It's almost like the guy who had the toilets in the galleries. What's the guy who like
Jesus Christ! Don't put me in art.
Sorry.
No, Duchamp.
Yeah, where the
Our
like
mutt.
yeah, and that's
Yeah.
the thing. Like people think that they can just take an object and it's art, and the truth is that there really is like when you do something and you do it in a radical way and you do it for the first time and you do it as a really grounded, intelligent sort of like integrated statement about the world or about art or about culture, then it's like that's art.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people who do that and they don't necessarily they don't get it.
do you? So, but on the flip side of all this, you've got people who are just like, oh, I can make a lot of money because they're good. They're good at the craft or whatever. They know how to utilize AI, and it's just like it just becomes like a money machine. Is that accurate at all, or?
There's always going to be that. That's been that since
Yeah.
the beginning of time.
Yeah.
There's people who are in it for the trend, the thing that's
Yeah, the trend,
the
or
payout,
the trendies,
the quick payout, and
the
then
quick
there's
payout,
people
yeah.
who are interested in diving deeper, and people who are in it for the long haul, and their work usually stands the test of time, and the person who's just in it to get that cash cow and get out, nobody remembers them. I could probably think of like a million artists right now who might have been like really big in the 80s. And I could even picture their artwork, and I have no fucking clue who they are.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
they just like, they were a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
The same way that like, people just try to do things that are trending and it doesn't have any sustainability.
Yeah, because I mean, I do think that you have to really love something to want to do it long enough to be to be like a master of something. Like God, it's exhausting and it's frustrating, especially when you are a relatively new artist in anything, and you're just like, you just want that mastery so bad, and yet you hate the failure, but you just continue on because you love it.
But at the same time, like in this age, as an artist, you have to wear all these different hats.
Yes.
You have to learn, like, for example, I have to know how to edit a video. I have to know how
Yeah.
to post it. I have to know how to market. I have to know how to, but I think essentially what maybe we're talking about is it's still the responsibility of the viewer, the reader, the observer to find what they find in whatever is presented in front of them as far as creativity or art. Whether it's Stone Age or whether it's present day with all the AI, it's the responsibility of the individual to find the value or the essence of the art, regardless of how, if it's mass produced or whatever.
Yeah, and I do feel like I think it's an intuitive thing, like beyond, like cognitive, like analytical thought. It's just something that you feel in your body if you're really listening to yourself, which sadly,
Right, yeah.
sadly a lot of people are disconnected. That's kind of the society we live in.
Well, it requires a certain, like being like waking up to some degree,
Yeah, exactly.
I think the responsibility is actually more of a shared collective responsibility amongst anybody involved in any of these things. It's not like it only solely relies on the viewer or the audience to know what they're getting into or have developed taste for what they're experiencing, as much as it might be for the artist to have considered the audience's barriers of entry into what they're doing. Certain painters have said that a painting must be functioning on like 12 different levels at one time, one of which is it should look good in a room and have an immediate presence to it.
Yeah.
So if you're just only solely trying to dive into the depths of humanity and your own experience as an artist without considering your own projections or your own world, without considering your audience might be not ready for that, you need to create levels of entry into that. You need to consider all the levels.
True.
So maybe consider first impressions a little bit more in your art. Like maybe you're making a film that can be experienced and hit you really deep on a multitude of levels, whether you're far along in the process, or probably a better example is music. There are certain songs that like you could just be snapping your fingers to it, loving it, and then that's one level of experiencing it. And then there's somebody who maybe knows how to play a song or starts to really read into the lyrics and having a very emotive reaction to it. It's another level of experience. And that artist maybe should have intended to do both things at the same time. Make a catchy pop song while also creating something that could have embedded the depths of
a little deeper.
A soul.
Yeah, a little deeper.
I think Alex and I talked about this the other day, and I was sharing with you what I've learned over the years when it comes to like screenplay writing or writing a short story is that it's always, to me, it seems like what draws me into a story, whether I'm reading it or watching a series, is the emotional, am I moved emotionally? And I call that the universal theme. I mean, Shakespeare, whoever Shakespeare was, he figured it out. He was using universal themes, right, that are timeless.
Yeah.
And that's why his works are still around.
Yeah.
And, if it moves me emotionally, then I got sucked into it.
Yeah, totally.
Whether it be art or film.
Yeah.
Can I ask, what is your screenplay writing? How long have you been doing it, and what what's the process like for you? I've done a little bit just to get familiar with it.
Oh, I'd love to hear about yours, but
It's like the characters start talking.
Oh
you know?
yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, my first screenplay, like short thing I wrote, probably when I was 21, so like 8 years ago, and it was horrible. And I consecutively wrote a lot of really bad screenplays that were just kind of like, I mean, I didn't understand structure at all, but I just was interested in it. And now I feel like, I mean, it happens in a lot of different ways. There's a few that I'm working on right now, too many, and one I had just a vision of the characters in a dream, and the situation to some extent of what was happening in a dream. And then another one I had the idea during a meditation. But it usually starts for me with like an image of a character, or a character's like emotional desires and place where they're at in their life, and then it kind of really flows super easily. You might relate to this, is that like sometimes I'll have that and it will feel so clear, and then putting it on the page, it will even maybe come like really easily. But then the big thing for me is conflict. I have a hard time with conflict and like the perpetual movement.
Trying to figure out what the conflict should be.
Yeah, I think that I just really get interested in moments in film that aren't conflict, that just feel a little bit more like slice of life. And it's definitely a struggle to be true to your voice, because I think that as an artist, you have a responsibility to, like, I mean, David Lynch is such a great example of that. He was just like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take 5 years to do it in this, like, you know, for his first film, like, he shot that in an AFI, like, not abandoned, but it was like, it used to be, I don't know, a place where they had storage or something, and that's where he shot a lot of it, because he was able to make the sets and keep them there, and it took forever.
Okay. Yeah.
But he's just as someone who is so true to himself, and when he did Dune, he was like suicidal, because he wasn't listening to his heart and his story. But at the same time, like, your story kind of like curates slowly over time, and then it's a hard thing to, like, you need to be affected, like Alex was saying, you need to be affected by your viewers and society, but then you also can't lose your truth in what you're creating.
Yeah, at the end of the day,
balance.
you make the decisions.
Yeah.
You should be aware of your audience. You should be aware of the world that you live in. As much as you're creating your own world, you should be aware of the world and the time that you live in, and the people who are going to engage your artwork.
And making sure it's actually engaging.
Yeah, I mean, but that, yeah, and that
What do you consider engaging?
I mean, we just watched Loaded. What was that movie? White Orchid. No,
you're talking about Adaptation?
Adaptation.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the images. Okay. So yeah, in Adaptation, they have that scene with the screenwriter, and he says, you know, things happen every day. Aren't you existing in the world? People die. People fall in love. Like, the world is like, you need like stuff in film and in whatever you're making, and I think that's the thing. It's like, you know, whenever I've done a writing class or anything, it's like, I think a big question is, why now? Mm-hmm. Like, why is it happening now? It's happening now not because it's a normal Tuesday for this character. It's because something momentous is happening to them. Whether it seems momentous to us or not, it's got to be for them. So, yeah.
I mean, I think you said it, though. It's pretty simple. What's engaging is something that strikes you emotionally.
That's what I was hoping you would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it could strike you in a sense of curiosity. Curiosity is
Right.
a pretty big emotion. It's and
Well, it
for
could be
lack
a-
of a better word, people saying something's interesting.
Right.
You know, which is a very sometimes complicated word to use in describing some artwork. That's interesting. Interesting how? But yeah, curiosity, you know, sadness, happiness, mystery, like all of these things like are emotions, and if something is striking you that way, it might just be enough to keep you engaged and keep watching. And
Yeah.
then it's on the artist to maybe respect the fact that you have the viewer's attention.
And then how's the story told? That's, you know, like what the style, you know, all that. But to me, it always comes back to you know, does it impact me emotionally? You know, it's just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, absolutely.
and I know I'm reading a good book when it's like, oh my gosh, yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite things is when you think you have something figured out, because it struck you so hard and you built such a deep relationship with it, like a really good song. You've heard it so many thousands of times, and you start to feel this kinship with the artist who made it,
Yeah.
like they're speaking just to you. And you start to think that these lyrics mean this thing. And you're listening to it and you're like, God, I fucking love that song. And then 10 years goes by and you've lived a little bit more and you've been through maybe a little bit more heartbreak, or you've learned a little bit more, just about life. You listen to that song again, you realize that you were wrong. That song is not about that thing. That song might be about that thing, but it also might be about this totally other thing. And that's really what I'm talking about, is that like, we're evolving just as much as art is evolving. And good art, stands alone. It stands alone as its own entity that's also evolving. You're not going to walk up to your friend after not seeing them for 20 years, or a child, or any person, any living, breathing thing, and expect them to be stagnant and not evolving. So
Right.
why should art do the same thing?
yeah.
Art shouldn't be stagnant. It should be evolving the exact same. And that's what good art does. That's what a good film does. That's what a good song does. A good story.
And good is I've learned to stay away from good, bad. Those words are far too many descriptives other than that. But what would you, so good art, could you put it into one sentence? Like,
I mean,
when you say good art,
we
when
already
you say
did it.
yeah, right.
we
Yeah,
already
you did it.
There's stuff that falls flat, and that doesn't mean that it's
Right.
necessarily bad. Like I make, yeah, fuck that. There's good and bad.
You know what
let's be black and white here. And there can be stuff that's just meh too. Like there can be the full spectrum, and that's also a personal thing.
I mean, yeah, it's personal.
I'm not a critic any
Sure,
more than
yeah.
anybody else is.
What I find, what I also realize, I just remember when I'm impacted by a story or art,
Yeah.
it's I'll end up researching the author or the director,
Yeah.
and who are they associated with, and how did they get where they're at. And so what I've learned over the years, it's like these people seem, the people that I'm drawn to, or that I consider like a good film or whatever, is somebody who's true to themselves,
Yeah.
first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they're true to themselves, I mean, they just can't help but have an impact,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely.
no matter how grandiose or small.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel like, okay, that person's true to themselves,
It's so true. Yeah.
you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the director David Lowery for that, because he does so many different kinds of things. But I feel like listening to his story, you should listen to. There's a podcast episode about him and his past and stuff, and it's just so clear that he's someone who's really driven by his love for it. David Lynch is another good example.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, I mean, shit. Like even they are like a good life lived. A good life lived is in itself a work of art. You don't have to necessarily be creating anything to be making art. We get hung up on the idea of that, but like you have an impact as a person and how you carry yourself in this world just as much as something that's created. I think we get hung up on the craftsmanship and technique and all these like things around it, but like the very first and foremost thing is perspective. How do you see the world? And then what are you doing about it?
Nice.
Yeah. Like, I mean, that's
Not just in a creative form, but our daily lives, right?
our daily lives. Anybody can be an artist. Start looking around, figure out how you see the world, and what are you doing about it. And that could just be having a conversation with somebody, and you suddenly touch them, and then that's art.
Yeah.
You spread something. And then the crazy thing about it is that it has a legacy in that it grows, but you yourself as the artist are temporary, you know, but yet you spider web out. You're like a ripple in a pond.
Yeah, the ripple keeps going.
And people are like, oh, the song is the art, and the fucking, you know, the painting is the art. It's like, no, the person who saw the world like that is the art. And that was their medium. Just like film is a medium, just like talking is a medium. Anything is just a medium. It's about how you see the world.
Is there anything in closing, as we wind down, is there anything you want to state to the world? One final,
Celebrate difference.
Okay.
Stop, getting hung up and compartmentalizing things. And, guess what? It makes it all so much better. The fact that we all are, our mission should be not to fixate on how we're different and why that's you know, a negative thing, but how amazing it is that we're all different. And we can't live 1,000 lives. We can't see one side of the mountain. We can't not to get totally fucking out there, but
at the same time,
if you're looking at one side of the mountain, it's going to take you X amount of time to circle that entire mountain, okay, to get a full 360 view and perspective of that one mountain. When instead, there's somebody who lives on the other side of that mountain who's been staring at that other side of the mountain for their entire life. And you can just have a conversation with them, and they're going to be very different than you.
Yeah.
But they can give you a really good view of that other side of the mountain in description as much as you can give them. And that's what binds us. That's what keeps us together. And that should be something that's celebrated and not something that we're trying to just make everybody the exact same.
And that's interesting because earlier I wanted to say, interject this idea I have of, I had a friend one time, I have a friend, and he had a problem, and I said, well, imagine, and I used to journal a lot, and I imagine a round table, you're in an art class, and the teacher says, okay, everybody take a seat, there are 10 chairs around a table, there's a statue in the middle of the table, piece of paper in front of you, okay, you have 2 minutes to sketch. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, great. Okay, now stand up and move, everybody rotate to your left one chair. And you do that 10 times, and then you put all those pieces of paper up on the wall, and suddenly it's like, oh, I can see your perspective. I can see where you were sitting when you drew that. Mm-hmm. And I think, it's kind of like a like a conflict resolution type. Mm-hmm. I'm sure they probably do that already.
Yeah.
But it's what you just said, it just ties into, celebrating the individuality and all the differences and being able to shift and see it from a different perspective is amazing.
Yeah, I love that collectively you guys, shared consciousness, you both have these very similar ideas and visuals of this experience.
What would you say in closing?
I think that my thing would just be to be very tender with your art, whatever that is. And I think that there's a lot of pressure right now to produce something, produce a lot of it, and share it, and get validation or get money or whatever it is. And I think that it's really easy to lose connection with what you're doing if you are...
But we see that all around us.
Yeah, in
just
the
like
rat race. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. It's everything, and that's the thing. I know that when I was young, I didn't understand, this is an example I always use, I didn't understand why I was learning cursive. I was like, well, I'm wasting time with this, it's even though I guess you're supposed to be faster when you do cursive, but I didn't understand, writing well. It was frustrating for me. And then as I've gotten older, I understand that, beauty for the sake of beauty, that's the point. That's the point of all of this, is being able to, is your experience, is this moment. And if you're spending 5 years on learning to write beautifully, like the fulfillment that you have in that is so much more sustainable and just, you know, fulfilling and sustainable than like if you buy something that's $500 or you like, you know, something else that society kind of says this is how you feel good about yourself,
Right.
and it's just not long lasting.
Yeah. Longevity.
Yeah.
Wise words. Well, I think the sentiment that you started with, that I felt like, oh my God, I have to remind myself that every day, is to be soft on your creative process. And that's kind of where you started. It's like,
so
God, there's so much
for
pressure
everyone.
right now
Yeah.
to create and have everything be amazing, so that yes, you have this agenda, which might be money, might be fame, might be more followers,
Might just
whatever
to be better.
might just be better. And that's only gonna like kind of, it's gonna corrode your artistic soul. It's like, yes, you should want to get better, but getting better is going to happen from just doing it. And
Yeah, it just happens naturally.
and like, if I find that if I get in these like negative moods or I'm pushing too hard, I've exited the flow of like what it means to really just like be making something and be like, that's when the most magical stuff comes in, is when you're just like making art for the sake of making art. You start to really discover some really amazing things. And I'll just get so hung up on being hard on myself.
Really?
In my creative process. Yeah, there's always going to be outside influences and pressures in that voice in your head that says, you know, like, this isn't good enough, or this isn't what it's supposed to look like. And you just have to just learn to silence those voices.
Yeah.
And get through making the thing. Just get through making it. Because guess what? There's going to be one on the other end of it. And if you don't, you're just...
Yeah.
You're going to torture. You're going to be the tortured artist your whole life.
Yeah.
Just enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that's really wise what you're saying.
But yeah, that also, like, I think all artists are like, you're miserable. Like, everyone's miserable for at least
You don't have to be.
30%. Well, it's like you said, I think that there's just times where you're just like, this is frustrating, and you do your best to learn to work with that.
Well, it's like any venture,
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Suffering is
Yeah.
universal.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter
Yeah.
what you do. It's part of the human experience.
Yeah.
And it's also a gift.
A friend once told me in Nevada City, she's a busker, singer-songwriter in Nevada
cool.
City, and she would like go on these treks with her boyfriend, like the Oregon Trail, and come back with like edited film, and I'm like, and I'm like in town, like filming interviews and at the Crazy Horse Saloon, and I would go in there with the camera, like I had permission to go in there and like record interviews and stories, and people are smoking marijuana out there and drinking and like telling stories. And she goes, Daryl, an artist is somebody who finishes the project. That's the artist.
I love that.
And I'll never forget it. It just like gives me goosebumps, because I could never complete anything because it had to be perfect, It's like, it has to be this way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
And eventually that's what brought me to what I'm doing now. It's like very little editing. I can capture the story, and I'm happy with it. So
that's great.
So
I mean, you're out here,
it's finding a way to not be hard on yourself.
I love that, finding a way.
Yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, what kind of acting, other than your films, like have you, or what?
I've done nothing big. I've done features and shorts for other people, like indies, and like I did an AI film once, which I don't know what happened with that, but it was like an AI, or it was like AI camera situation, and I never got to see it, but you had to wear like one of those Oculus things to watch it, and they had like a bunch of stuff going on. Yep, I don't know what happened to that. That's how a lot of project goes. You're like, okay, well, maybe that will get finished, maybe it won't. Yeah.
I've been used, and I never get to see the end result.
Yep.
And so, one other thing I was going to say is, like, we all know that a good story, like like an impactful story, is one about the journey, right? I mean, that's kind of cliche, but it's true.
Yeah.
But also, I was painting years ago, frustrated, and like I met this really good artist here locally. She's not here anymore, but. And she said, well, bring your canvas and paints and show me what you're doing. Because I was like, give me some guidance. And I just started painting on the canvas. And within a minute, she said, oh, you're all about the process. Mm-hmm. So the journey in a story and the process, and I'll never forget that too. Did
she say that in a negative way?
No, she said there are two types of artists. one, like I can't remember the other one, like a technical,
Mm-hmm.
plan it out. But I just immediately, started like painting abstract or whatever, trying to create something. And she said, "You're about the process. You can't ask for anything more." Like
That's 100% true.
it's
That's
yeah.
so
She just
cool.
like, and I'm like, whoa, that was revelational.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that's
so-
amazing. I love both of those little
Yeah.
pieces of advice. So good.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, in my daily life, I try to remember that when I'm having communicating with people, it's about the process.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
feel like oftentimes as an artist, when you're, if you are a process person, you'll find that by the time that you've completed something, sometimes you're really, you just don't give a fuck about what you just made
Oh,
because you're
yeah.
already moved on.
on to something
Yeah,
else.
that's
Right.
definitely how
That's what
we
I've
are.
noticed about
Yeah.
myself.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You're
that's
like,
what we're all like that.
And then later you get to enjoy it because you
Yeah.
put space between you and it. And
Right.
then you go, oh yeah, I remember making that. That was so fun. That was such a great time in my life. And you remember how frustrating it was and how
Yeah.
you couldn't wait to get done with it so you could
Right.
start
So I
making
could
those
do
other ideas that were up in your head.
Right.
Yep.
Didn't make a dime, but whatever.
Yeah.
No, no.
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a good way to be.
So when you go back to LA, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you plan to live in LA, or do you? I'm just curious. Do you plan to relocate?
Oh, we live in LA, but we really want
Wanna
to
kill 'em.
potentially buy a property up here,
Yeah.
and
Nice.
do part-time,
Okay.
because yeah, I mean LA it's a tough city and it's expensive, but it's
Yeah.
hard as an artist to not have a foot there, at least seemingly. We're trying to create a reality where that's not the case.
I'm constantly
Yeah.
trying. I've been there for over a decade, and I'm constantly trying. Like, the city is so inspirational, and obviously creeps into my work in such an interesting way, and I'm so thankful for it. I'm thankful for the relationships that I've built there, and I'm thankful for the experiences that I've had. But if I'm talking about maybe my spirit a little bit more, I feel so much more crisis in that city than I do in the mountains. And that could just be, growing up in Colorado, that could be the way that I connect with nature. But that does make me really curious about how it might affect my work,
Yeah.
because I
yeah.
can't help but paint what I see and what's around me. But it's also an exciting journey to take. But yeah, I think we'll always have like a foot there because it's such an exciting city. There's so much going on, but it's also a very dangerous place. And I don't mean dangerous in, yeah, there's, crime and whatever, that kind of danger, that's everywhere. But it's dangerous in that it's constantly, you think you're using it to get further, but it is sucking you dry as well.
Yeah.
And if you're not aware of it, you're a fool. Because even if you're excelling and you're, stepping all the stones and climbing those ladders, doing all the things that you're doing, pieces of you are being taken by the city as well.
Wow, that's pretty
Yeah.
intense.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, it's just the truth. And you can navigate it, and you can survive, and you can grow tough skin, and you can. But you're making huge sacrifices too.
Cutting your soul piece by piece.
Yeah, you're making huge. It's that return
Yeah.
versus loss thing that's happening, and so I think I don't know. I want to be up here, but I also want to obviously have friends down there, and I like it down there. But
Yeah. Well, thank you for your time,
Thank you.
and I'm so glad that you and I met, Alex. And
Yeah,
we were
what a
able to do this.
serendipitous thing, huh?
Yeah, it's like,
I'm glad we got the flat.
yeah, I appreciate your time. I know you're going to dinner tonight, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
we're going to
I hope,
dinner.
I hope I'm not making you
Oh,
late.
I don't think
You're
so.
all good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think we're good.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah,
This is
thank you so
nice.
much. And
Hopefully, oh yeah, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just saying, hopefully when we come back up, we can hang out and do an update and like maybe
Yeah, definitely.
hang out, get some food.
I know you're gonna come back.
We're coming back.
Yeah,
I gotta come back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, if I ever the other day, if I ever go to LA, like
Please.
Oh, please.
I'll
Hit,
look
me-
you
hit
up.
us up.
Yeah,
Hit us
definitely.
up.
That'd be
Yeah,
great.
that would be awesome.
right on. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for watching this.